drive. Tatum the finish. It is banner 18. The mission commanded is mission accomplished.
What's up, everyone? This is Noa Dalzell, and I'm here with another episode of You Got Boston, live from TD Garden. You can see the banners behind me in the court, hopefully. Right after the Celtics beat the Magic 109-100 to get a 2-0 lead in this series. And this was my favorite game that I've covered definitely since last year's playoffs, but even within last year's playoff run, this was an all-timer for me, or at least an all-timer in the sense that I've covered this team for the last 2 seasons. But such an incredible energy in this building, one of the best energies that I've experienced here. I feel like Tatum being out, which was something that was, he was listed as doubtful with this wrist injury. And then Joe said it was going to be a game time decision. And as we're nearing the tip-off, we see that he's not on the floor for his usual warm-up time. He wasn't in the locker room for the usual time that he'd be in the locker room, and it became quite apparent that he was not playing in this game, but also he was probably never going to play in this game, or at least like they probably knew this morning that he wasn't going to play in this game. So no Jayson Tatum means that other guys had to step up, and they definitely did. And I think the format of this podcast that I'm going to maintain throughout this playoff run is picking 4 encouraging things for each game, win or loss. And some games, it's probably going to be really hard to come up with 4 things. Not tonight. Tonight is super easy. In fact, it was hard to pick just 4. But I'll start at the top. The number one thing that you have to find encouraging if you are a Celtics fan, if you watch this game, is Jaylen Brown, the same guy that nobody was sure if he was going to be available. Nobody was sure what version of him you were going to get if the postseason began today. A couple weeks back in New York, he did not look good in Madison Square Garden. He looked limited. He looked like he was in pain. Everybody wondered, is he not going to be able to be his best self in this playoff run? Did he mismanage this knee injury? Should he have rested longer? All those questions were out there circulating. I always had faith that he did what was best for him, because ultimately he's prioritizing his career, his health, his ability to jump and move is critical to his livelihood. So I never thought that he was going to do something to jeopardize that. And he said afterwards, this is not vindication because it's game 2. But I think it's a little bit of vindication for him, because he came out and a night where they really needed him with Tatum out. He had one of the best games that I've seen him play this season. 36 points on 12 of 19 shooting, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, and most impressively, probably he shot 5 of 7 from 3. And I say that's most impressive because, one, he had a really bad shooting season for his standards. He was like 32% all year. Then in April, he's just completely found a rhythm beyond the arc. He's up to 50% shooting from 3 this season, and comes down in the third quarter. Again, another game where it was close at the half. Beginning of the third quarter, he hits 2 quick threes. And it was one of those moments where everybody knows, if you've played basketball, if you've watched basketball, that at the beginning of the third quarter is when you would expect, is when you want to make a little bit of a run if it's a close game at the half. And when Jaylen hit those 2 threes, I thought to myself, he's going to now take it until he misses a few. And he's going to take a few heat check threes. But that's not what he did. Instead of forcing it, he takes those few and then he proceeds to find Derek and Al and continue to make the extra pass. I don't think he forced the issue once in this game. And considering the fact that he was the guy tonight, and I think he probably knew that, he could have walked into this game and said, hey, Tatum's out. This is my chance to go over 50. And especially because he had it going early, he could have forced a couple of bad looks. He never did that. And so offensively, I felt like he attracted so much attention. Pritchard said afterwards they couldn't guard him. Like, that's just the reality of it. And so you're encouraged because this guy is so important to what the Celtics are able to do on both ends. You're encouraged because there was a lot of questions around what he was going to look like. And I thought that in game 1, a lot of those questions were answered in the sense that he looked better. He looked healthier than he looked in the last times we saw him in the regular season. So the rest, the injections, it all worked. It all helped him. And I'm sure he's still playing through some pain, but it's a different level of pain. It has to be, or he's just putting up an insane front because he's jumping. He's able to get past defenders better. Defensively, he had some big plays. There was a steal and dunk that got Torrey Craig out of his seat and sprinting down the court. So excited that Jaylen was able to kind of put that defensive pressure as well. And then he finishes this game with 3 turnovers, which you'll live with when he's one of the primary scorers, primary initiators in an offense. 5 assists in this game. Like, I do think that he was just trying to make the right play at time after time. And I think that this is when he shines. You know, he loves the playoffs. He has had so many big moments. You think about him winning Eastern Conference Finals MVP. You would think about him winning Finals MVP, and you think about even years prior. Like, he had a lot of big moments in, you know, the younger days of his career. And sometimes people remember the bad ones. People remember Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals against Miami in 23. Like, that was moment for him, and he's the first person that will admit that and say that, and that motivated him and that fueled him for 2024. But there should be no surprise at this point that even though he had a little bit of an uneven season shooting, it wasn't the best year of his career. He definitely has had better ones. He's still an elite player that when the pressure is on and the time is, you know, that you need to get a big win and you're down your star, you're down your MVP, like, there really shouldn't be doubts about his abilities. And that doesn't mean that he was for sure going to have this game, but his body of work speaks for itself. And I think at this point, he has earned the right to have people believe in him. And that's why I was a little frustrated when there was such a discussion around, like, is he being reckless? Is he being irresponsible and selfish down the stretch here during the regular season? Because ultimately, like, I think that everything that he's ever done has put himself in position to be in, you know, to be able to impact winning and to help this team. And I think that he was able to do that here. So that was a big piece. So that was a big part of all this. And he's definitely the most encouraging thing out of this game. And perhaps the most encouraging part, he played almost 42 minutes. And so you think about, you know, there was potentially a minutes restriction. He played 30 minutes in Game 1. And Joe said that was more about substitution patterns. But with Tatum out, you know, are they going to go to Baylor Shireman? Are they going to go to Torrey Craig? Those seemed very unlikely possibilities to me. I did not expect either of those guys to get any rotational minutes right now with the rest of the roster still available. And when you look down the line, like, who got those minutes, Jaylen probably played a few more than he normally would have. Pritchard, and I'll talk more about Pritchard, but, you know, other guys absorbed those minutes rather than adding somebody to the rotation. And Jaylen had a, you know, 16-point Game 1 and was kind of finding his footing and was impactful. And afterwards, when he was asked about, you know, is it bothering you that everybody's talking about your knee? He just said, let's get ready for Game 2. Like, he means business. He's been there before. And the things that he says, I think that they reflect, you know, his views that at this point, you know, he's just prioritizing getting to the next thing. And he knows how early it is. He's been to 2 NBA finals, a bunch of Eastern Conference Finals appearances. So he expects to get to this point. He expects this to just be the beginning of a long journey. And I think they all do. But that was the big takeaway for me. If you have to pick one thing from this game, it's the fact that the same guy that for now over a month we've been so worried about his longer term outlook, he answered all of those questions today and some, because this Magic team, they had no answers for him. And I don't know that the 3-point shooting is going to be able to sustain to this level. Like, he's shooting lights out right now. But it's certainly a welcome sign, and he was due for some, because I think he was just in a slump for a few months there. And he's a good shooter. You know, he's a guy that there's a reason why teams guard him mostly on the perimeter. I think that he was taking in rhythm threes. He doesn't force them. He's not going to be a guy that takes 10, 11 threes in a game. Even tonight, even though he was feeling good, he only took 7. Like, he knows his game. He knows his strengths. He knows where he can impact teams as much as possible. So great performance from him. And that's why he's the first encouraging thing from this game to a victory. Second, I'll give a shout out to Peyton Pritchard, who wins 6th Man of the Year yesterday, does a pregame press conference with the media just a couple hours before tip-off here, where he's reflecting on his journey. He's reflecting on winning this award that it was announced to him on TNT. He was sitting at home with his wife and dad and player development coach Craig. And I think Pritchard, this is something that he wanted. He was always very clear that this was not the ultimate goal, and this was not something that was going to define him. But he said he's not going to relish in it too much, because ultimately he wants to win a championship. And he said that'll feel a lot better winning a championship with this award than just having this award as a standalone. After the game, Abby Chin asked him, like, was it hard to pivot from the award, pregame press conference ceremony, then he gets the award at center court, Brad Stevens hands it to him. Like, was it hard to pivot? And he said, not really, because I'm not really relishing that right now. Like, I'm going to think about this award more in the off season. This was one of my favorite Pritchard games. And if you look at the stat sheet, it's not super impressive. 14 points on 5 of 11 shooting. He finishes 3 of 6 from 3. He hit his final 2, 3 rebounds, 0 assists, 1 steal, 1 turnover, 3 fouls. So, the 14 points is right around his season average. Having no assists is a little bit unusual for him. I don't think the box score at all measures his impact in this game. I thought defensively he was huge, both pressuring the ball, 3/4 court, full court. A couple of times he got switched onto Paolo and got big stops. He's not a guy that you can just exploit the way that people used to feel about him. I think some of it was reputational. Some of it was just the reality was that he wasn't, he gets picked out of plays all the time. I think now when, guys are hunting him, yeah, he's undersized, but he knows how to, make up for that a little bit. He mentioned yesterday in practice and Wednesday that Kyle Lowry is somebody that he's been studying his game a little bit. Marcus Smart, who he played with for a while, he's picked up pointers from him. So he's looking at undersized guards, and Marcus is not that undersized, but he's looking at undersized guards, that reflect his body type and also the ones that don't, to try to become the best defender possible. And I talked about this after game one because Joe Mazzulla noted after the game, like the offense is great, but the defense is really kind of as good as the offense. I thought in this one, he missed some easy shots earlier on. He had that massive and one layup with just under 2 minutes to go that really was kind of like the dagger play, I thought, in this game. I asked him about whether that type of finish is a point of pride. He said, I just was happy I made a layup because I had missed so many bunnies in this game. So he finishes 5 of 11, but he easily could have finished 7 or 8 or 8 of 11. Like, I thought he was able to get to the basket. He was able to create separation. And again, similar to my tune about Jaylen, like, so many people wondered, are these empty calories? Are these empty points? Is he just basically feasting off of lower, bottom feeding teams in the NBA and going off for 40, and then he can't compete with the Cleveland Cavaliers of the world, the Oklahoma City Thunders? This Magic team is top 5 in the NBA. They're very good. They didn't have Jayson Tatum today. They put extra pressure on him. I thought, in the second half, there were even some plays where they doubled him, really trying to get the ball out of his hand. And he handled it as good as anybody. So in those moments when, Jaylen was out, he was able to kind of run the offense. I think you're seeing now that he's just a high impact player on both ends. One of the steal that he had was on an inbounds play. He had a couple of tough rebounds. Like, he just makes winning plays. And I think it's not the newest thought at this point, because Joe has stressed it all year that Peyton Pritchard is not just a 3-point shooter, that, he's an elite 3-point shooter. He shot 41.8% from 3 this season, but it's everything else that he does that makes a huge impact. So yeah, I thought that was just encouraging to see now through 2 games. First game, he looks like he's almost going to be out of the rotation. He's the 9th player in the rotation, comes in, scores 11 points in 3 minutes, finishes with 18. This game, the offense was slow to start, and he looked a little frustrated, and I think even passed up a few shots, but it came around, and at the same time, even when it wasn't there, he was able to make an impact. And for people who wondered, like, who is going to play those minutes with Tatum out, the answer was Pritchard. He finishes with 33 minutes in this game, so he's playing starter minutes at this point. I think that there's, that's kind of the expectation, is that he can play starter minutes, similar to Al Horford, who was a starter in this game and played 32 minutes. But Pritchard, he's ready for a bigger role. Joe kind of hinted at it pregame that it's a sacrifice to be 6th man. And for Malcolm Brogdon, it was a challenge to go from a starter to a bench player. Pritchard's never started in the NBA, but certainly you think that he can get there. And I asked him before the game when he had that press conference, like, do you let yourself think about, like, what individual you can achieve, what individual you can aspire to be? And he said, I don't set any limits for myself. And I think people that have watched this show or have followed me elsewhere know that I think that his ceiling is enormously high based on just his trajectory, his growth so far, his shot making, his style of play, and his work ethic. Assistant General Manager Mike Zarin tweeted out something that was really resounding to me. He said, in the last 20 plus years, a lot of legends have come through this building. That includes Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, the current stars. He said nobody has worked harder than Peyton Pritchard. He didn't have to say that. I think he said that because it's genuine. And ultimately, I think it reflects what everybody thinks about this guy. And it's a big part of why he went from being out of the rotation, 18 months ago, to now being the most valuable bench player, and a guy who, even in a game where he didn't necessarily have his shot going from the jump, was hugely impactful. And I think that it spells success for the Celtics moving forward. I think they're going to need him in this playoff run. They're going to need everybody, but he wasn't a huge factor in a lot of those games last season. And obviously he had his marquee moments, the half-court heave. People are never going to forget those plays, but I think that this time around he's ready for a larger role. And through 2 games here, he scored 19 points, 14 points. I think he's showcasing that he is ready for that role. He's going to relish it, and he's going to impact that team. That's what I expect to continue seeing. PrizePicks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash. With millions of members, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. Cash in on the basketball playoffs with PrizePicks. Don't miss your last chance to add your favorite players from the core to your PrizePicks lineup. Whether it's points, rebounds, assists, take your pick of more or less for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash today. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. The basketball playoffs are here and the action is heating up on PrizePicks, the best place to cash in on your favorite spots. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. So I mentioned Jaylen Brown as one of the encouraging things in this game. Peyton Pritchard's continued ascension and consistency, I think something that you can now grow to rely on him rather than just view him as a potential spark off the bench. Those are my two highest level takeaways. But I said I'm going to give you guys 4 each game, and I certainly have 2 additional ones from this game to win. Number 3 here is going to be Jrue Holiday, who, another guy, his numbers are not going to jump off the box score. Finishes with 11 points in this one, 4 of 9 shooting, 6 assists, 4 rebounds, a block. But again, another guy who just, first of all, his impact's never felt in the box score. And it's something that I asked assistant coach Charles Lee about, so former Celtics assistant coach, current Charlotte Hornets head coach. And it's just his defensive impact is kind of immeasurable, the way that he kind of commands that side of the floor. But even in this game, 11 points is not going to, it's not going to blow anybody away. But a couple times they needed a timely basket from him, and he just drove right past his defender. One time he dunked at home right in front of the Celtics bench, and they had a massive reaction to it. And Pritchard said afterwards that they weren't surprised. I think they see him dunk a lot more than we see him dunk. He only dunked once during the regular season, and it was not much of a dunk. So this was definitely the most, kind of like emphatic dunk that we've seen from him this year, and one of the most I've seen from him in live in general. I'm sure he had a few last year, but I think that there was questions around the Olympics, and he was really good in the Olympics. He was really good in the playoffs last year and in the finals, and then comes this year and just seems like he's a step slower offensively. First half of the season, he struggled with his shots. Defensively, I think obviously he's still an elite defender, but there were definitely moments and times where the question crept up in people's minds of like, has he lost a step? He is 34 years old. Obviously, is an elite guard defender. You need your athleticism and quickness, and definitely stuck out to me that I don't think that he has. I don't think that. I think maybe he was load managing a little bit during the regular season. He was dealing with some lingering things, having played through the summer, through June. Like, he really didn't have much rest at all. And of the 3 Celtics players, Jrue, Derek, and Jayson, Jrue Holiday had the heaviest load in that Olympic run. So he really, not only was he obviously you have to go through prep, and even if you're not playing, there's a certain toll that just being on a team and going through pregame and shoot-arounds and all that takes on you. But Jrue really played some in-game minutes as well. So I thought that, through 2 games here, you're seeing that he can reach another level. The big story in game 1 was in that third quarter that he was able to kind of change the tune of that game and just defensively had a massive impact. And everybody talked about it afterwards. Everybody wrote their stories about it afterwards. I felt like in this game, Jrue was equally impactful defensively, and then also had some really timely baskets and some very athletic plays that I don't really have reason to think moving forward that we're going to see a different version of Jrue than we did last year. I feel like his contract extension became a big topic of discussion of late. Like, inevitably, they're going to have to trade somebody. It's going to be Jrue. I don't think this guy is as dispensable as the way people talk about him sometimes, because he's a little bit older, and because I don't think anybody wants to give up on Derek, who's 30 and critical to everything this team does. But in these moments, Jrue is invaluable. And Jaylen Brown, after game 1, said, you guys talk about the regular season, but the playoffs are the playoffs. And Jrue kind of steps up for those moments. And I think we're seeing that through 2 games here. And there's a level of leadership, of steadiness that he provides for this team. And again, with Jayson Tatum out, it's a little bit more on everybody else. He wasn't necessarily a guy that took a whole lot more shots. Actually, the guard play in general was a little bit more limited. Derek was 8 of 14, 6 of 14, and Jrue was 4 of 9. I can barely see my box score here. Here, I zoomed in. Now I can see. So it's not like everybody started chucking shots because Tatum was out. I think it was pretty widely, evenly distributed. Jaylen took 19, Al took 10, Kristaps took 14, Derek 14, Jrue 9, Pritchard 11, Hauser 2, Luke 1. So like nobody took 20 shots, despite Tatum being out. So I like that. That's how I wanted them to approach it. I wanted it to be like a little bit more democratic. And ultimately, I think Jrue is one of those guys that's going to continue to have a big role to play offensively. And I would not be surprised if in this series he goes out for 20 points at some point. But the defensive impact has been unwavering, and it's been a big part of why they've been able to hold Orlando to 100 points in this game and below 100 points in the previous one. So that's, the offense has been a little bit muddy. I think they're going to go through things and they're going to figure out how to be better. But defensively, this team's been really good at containing Orlando's kind of anemic offense too, I'll admit. But yeah, shout out to Jrue Holiday for continuing to show that I think that the thing that he provided for the Celtics in their last playoff run, there's no reason to think that he's not going to be able to run that back. And tonight was another indication of that. And finally, I saved the best for last. Kristaps Porzingis really struggled in game one offensively. He was pretty good defensively, but was 1 of 8 from the field, 5 points. Kristaps, he wants to show out for this crowd. He wants to have big time games. He hasn't had a ton of playoff moments. Obviously, last year in that final series, game 1 was massive. Nobody will ever forget that one. And then comes back, plays game 2 and game 5. So limited, deals with the calf injury at one point in the playoffs, then deals with a leg injury. So I know it was a frustrating run for him. Obviously, he's just grateful that they won the championship and that he was able to be part of that. But, it's clear he wants to be a major contributor here. In this game, he finishes with 20 points, was really effective at getting to the line, shot 10 of 14 from the free throw line, still missed a bunch of shots he normally would make. He was 0 of 5 from 3, 5 of 14 from the field overall. But I thought that his impact on this one was massive. 10 rebounds, 5 of which were offensive rebounds. In general, they had offensive rebounds up the wazoo. 4 offensive rebounds for Al Horford, 2 for Jrue Holiday. This is as a point of emphasis for this team to be aggressive, to crash the glass is what the Magic do. And Kristaps really led the charge there. And then defensively, 2 blocks and 2 steals. That's a nice Derek White stat line there. And the highlight moment for him is the fan interaction. If you were in the building, you're never going to forget the way he reacted to getting an elbow to the face, laying there, head is gushing blood. This is like 2 weeks after he got 4 stitches in his nose after getting a shot to the head. I think that was against the Phoenix Suns. And now he comes out a couple weeks later, game 2 of the playoffs, and blood is gushing on his head. It was everywhere. He goes back to the locker room really quickly, gets a bandage on that cut just so that he can take the flagrant foul free throws, splits those, goes back in the locker room. And I thought, we're probably not going to see him again. He's going to get stitches. It's going to be a while. I heard there was blood all over the halls, so I didn't see it myself, but I heard it was quite the scene. And he comes back in 4 minutes into that fourth quarter, and the game is still within reach. It's like an 8-point game at that point, and comes back in and immediately checks back into the game. And he was asked about it by Gary Washburn afterwards of did you consider, most of us probably would have just sat out the rest of the way. He said, why would I not? My legs still work. I want to be out there. And I think the reality is he's dealt with a lot of serious injuries between the leg surgery that he had over the summer, the ACL tear, a bunch of other things. So this little stuff, it's entertaining for him. And he's a big, he's into UFC. This is like his WWE moment, he said. And I think he plays it up. He knows how to manipulate the environment around him and kind of engage the fans. And I say manipulate in a positive way, in the way that Joe Mazzulla refers to guys kind of maximizing the arena around them, maximizing the interactions with the fans. He turned it into from like a fourth quarter that the Magic were within reach to now it's like a celebration here, all because he got a shot to the face. And he relishes that. He loves playing in front of this crowd. It's incredibly obvious. You don't even need to ask him about it, although we ask him about it all the time because you can see it every time. Every trip he made to the locker room in that fourth quarter, he was energizing the crowd, and they're going to need him for this playoff run. I think that there's an understanding where the last year the field was a little bit weaker. I think everybody expects this playoff run to be a little bit more challenging. You also can't count on everything that went right last year to go right again from a health standpoint as it relates to everybody else, from just shot making standpoint. There were some very unlikely wins that they pulled off. I'm thinking about game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals where Jaylen gets that deflection and hits the corner 3. You don't know that you're going to get that all back. So loved this performance from Kristaps. Thought that, he battled. He showed physicality on defensively. I thought that he was enormously impactful in both of these games. He had 4 steals in game 1. But above all, he's continuing to cement his legend here in Boston. And that's what people are going to really remember him for. There's the undertone of physicality in this series. I talked about it on our post-game show, so you can check that out. CLNS Media, we have all of the coverage. The Garden Report show, I did a show with Bobby as well. So we talked about all this stuff. You can watch the full interview with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope that Bobby had at shoot-around ahead of this game. But there's a lot of physicality going on here. There was the hard foul on Tatum that ultimately injured his wrist and kept him out of game 2. Then Al Horford and KCP, we have this tussle at center court after a foul by KCP that I think might have been inadvertent actually, but I don't know. You guys can have your own interpretations, but tensions are flaring here. Al told Gary Washburn after the game that he felt like that foul was intentional. And I think through it, Porzingis is bringing this kind of levity to it while still embracing the physicality, certainly. but he's bringing a certain levity to it, and I think this team is really relishing in the fact that they're playing against a Magic team that is desperate, that is hard playing, and that is really physical, and it's made the fans be more engaged. I don't know that I would have expected there to be a villain in this series, and now there is, and it's KCP. He's embracing it. His comments at shoot around kind of made me feel like he's taking this on. He could have deflected and said, I really felt so terrible that I hurt him and I really didn't mean to, but he's taking on this role now. And everybody's kind of feeding back into it. Al's feeding into it. Pritchard said he told Al, this is fun. This is basketball. And I think Kristaps has been a big part of their response because he's been playing much more physical than he sometimes has earlier in his career. Certainly, I thought that he held his own a lot better in game 2 than in game 1. And so what this game showed me about Kristaps is that he has, it's nothing new. We know that he has that crowd interaction and that edge, but it was really a key part of this game, and it was a key part of the win, and it was a big part of why they were able to kind of stay the course, because they didn't get a ton from Luke in this game. They didn't get a ton from Sam. Those guys combined for 0 of 3 from the field. Sam played 13 minutes. Luke played 11. But Kristaps was critical. Al was critical as well, but he doesn't get to be one of my 4 encouraging things because I can only have 4. So maybe Al will get a shout out after the next game. So I'm headed to Orlando. I'm recording this. It's about 1 a.m. right now. I'm still at TD Garden. My flight's in 5 hours. TBD on whether I sleep or not. Hopefully I get like an hour, but I still have to write my post-game article, so maybe I won't. But check this out. Check out all of our coverage on CLNS Media. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you're watching this on CLNS Media, it's the You Got Boston podcast. Turn on notifications so you don't miss a show the rest of the playoffs. And this podcast is also on Apple, Spotify, so you can subscribe, leave a review, leave a rating. All that really helps as we head to the home stretch of the season where I'm going to be having these shows almost every day after every game. Some live shows when we get a chance. Did a live show yesterday answering questions after practice. So when we get a chance to do that, we'll do that as well. But check out the rest of our content on CLNS. Every word that a player utters during this playoff run, whether it's a shoot around, whether it's at practice, whether it's after a game, before a game, it'll be on there. So if you want to hear the players in their own words, I always think that as much as reading articles is great, and I certainly encourage you to read my articles on Celtics blog, sometimes it's nice to also get the players' mood and tone, and you can only really get that from watching the press conference. So you can watch all of those there. And with that, I will end it here. I will have more coverage for you all on Friday after Game 3 in Orlando. Looking forward to being on the ground in a little bit of a warmer place, although the weather's been pretty good here, so I can't complain. Thanks for watching as always, and hope you enjoyed this one as much as I did.